Before we move on, I just want to go through a few terms and get some clarity on some of the terminology that we're going to be using, just to sort of make sure we're all on the same page, and when I use a word, you'll know what I'm talking about, basically. So first of all, let's bring up our color palette here. So if you look at this, Photoshop uses HSB, which is hue, saturation, and for some odd reason they've called it brightness, when in actual fact they mean value, which is the real, well, it's the terminology I learnt as in art school to use. Value means brightness, basically. Let's just go through these in a bit more detail. Hue is another word for colour, basically, if you think of it like that. You know, as I change the colour, so if I leave that up in the top right hand corner and I slide this down, you can see the hue changes because it's got it's looking at a different colour every time. The saturation is still the same and the value is still the same, but the hue is changing. You can see as I bring it down, I come back to 0, because red at the bottom, red at the top, so it starts from 0 and goes all the way through the palette. So hue is colour, basically. So just think of that. When you see hue, think colour. Just think colour. That's it. Okay, so saturation is how intense the colour is. So if I bring this along, if I now grab my little picker here, a little circle, and I move it along the top to the left, you know, the saturation is going to go from pure red to no red to white, basically. So if I drag it along, you watch what the S will change as I bring it along. Nothing else changes because it's still the same hue, still the same value in terms of brightness. In terms of the brightness of that particular hue is at 100%. It can't, white can't go any brighter than white. Red, pure red, can't go any brighter than pure red. That's it. So the value stays the same. So that's saturation. So all we're doing is changing the saturation of that color. But the value and the hue is the same. The hue of that particular color there can't get any more intense. I can't make that any more intense than what you can see there, unless I saturate it more with the color. But the value is the same for that particular RGB value. I can't make it any brighter or I can't change the value of it. Value, i.e. what they've called brightness here, B is brightness, is how bright, how bright or dark the hue is. See how dark it is in the bottom right hand corner? If I drag that down now, the B value is going to change. The hue will stay the same and the saturation will stay the same for that particular colour, but the value, i.e. the brightness of it, will change. So the darker it gets, the lower the value. You can see it coming down, 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 down. It's still the same hue, but I'm just adding value to that hue, to the I'm decreasing the value of that hue, of that colour, by adding black to it, and until there's nothing, until it's pure black. Black is black. If I go along here, I can't change the values of black, and I can't change the hue of black. Black is black, and that's all there is to it. Now it's saying the saturation is changing, but in fact it's not, because there is no colour, there is no hue, and there is no saturation there. So if I take it back up again, so down the right hand side here we've got value. Along the top we've got saturation, and then in the center, if I go diagonally, it changes both. It changes both saturation and value. You can see both numbers changing as I go diagonally down through. If I want to change the hue, I have to use this bar here. So I drag it up and down like so. So I can pick a colour, and that's quite intense, so I can desaturate it. I'm like, oh, that's a bit bright so I can change the value of it. You see how it works? It's quite simple. So hue is the color. Saturation is how intense the color is. Value, i.e. B here, is how dark or light the hue is. That's it, really. You'll also hear things like obviously brightness, because it has it in Photoshop, and you'll also hear people talking about tint, and tint is a kind of another word for value, really. Although, you know, it's mostly related to adding tint, making it brighter. You know, you add a tint to a color, you tend to sort of add white to that color. You tend to make it brighter. So even though it's related to value, its tint is going up towards brightness. Whereas shade, if you want to add shade to a color, you know, that's related to value, but that's more towards darkness. You're adding some shade, you know, to your color. You've heard of people talk about standing in the shade, and you know, it's because they're going into shadow. So it's related to, you know, it's related to darkness. So tint is up, shade is down, brightness is basically value. And sometimes you'll hear people talk about color temperature. Now that is, you know, color temperature is really important in arts, because you can convey a lot of feeling in your art using temperature. For example, you know, something quite warm. You know, a lot of people use red for fire and anger, and you know, a lot of people use blues and stuff for cold, and a lot of moody paintings are done using blues, and also blue is used in shadow quite a lot. So you know, when you think about shadow, you think about cool temperatures. So that's why they use blue in shadows, you know, very subtly. You may not notice it, but it's there, and your brain just absorbs it and picks it up. So yes, so that's what color temperature is. It's, you know, it's ranging from fiery hot reds to cool sort of blues, or you know, you're getting some nice greeny sort of colors which are quite in the middle and a bit hazy, and yellows. You know, and temperature, color temperature. If you do a bit of research on color temperature, it's, you know, you can convey a lot of emotion. It's very subliminal in art. People don't really understand why they feel the way they do when they look at a piece of art. But it's generally because the artists have used very specific colors, a very specific composition, and a combination of various things, particularly color temperature, and that conveys emotion in the art. So that's it. That's color. That's just some basic terminology to grasp going forwards. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So HSB is hue, saturation, value, even though they put a B for brightness. I think that's just to simplify it, basically, which I don't think they really need to do that. RGB is your red, green and blue values, and as you move this around, you'll see, you know, you'll see you're basically mixing your colors as you move your little cursor around here. You know, if you go for greys, they all stay the same because there's no hue in grey. Basically, grey is grey. It's colorless, and that's why they're all equal. These colors aren't the same as paints. They don't. Well, we talk about this in the next lecture. So paints use a different system to this because it doesn't work. This is RGB set up for technology, and because it uses light instead of actual physical paint. So it's a slightly different system, but it, you know, colors are colors, and they all colors act the same when they're together. It's just the way they're calculated from a technical perspective is different if it's on technology on a screen like this, or whether it's on the canvas. But the colours will still work the same once you've mixed them. So even though you use RGB values to find your colors. It'll be different for paints, even though you can make the same color and it will still work the same. You'll do it in a different way in Paint than you would if you were in Photoshop, for example. Anyway, so that's a few bits of terminology there I'm going to be using, and things that you should sort of get your head around a little bit. And then I'll talk about more terminology as we go through this sort of section. So any questions, let me know. I'll see you in the next lecture.